Bowen was pretty tough on the Transcendentalists and on Emerson in particular. However, it didn't come anywhere near to the sort of raving, rabid, highly emotionally charged rejection of transcendentalism, and especially Emerson in his Divinity School address that Andrews Norton puts out. The thing you got to know about Andrews Norton was probably the most respected member of the Unitarian community at the time Emerson was delivering all this stuff. Andrews Norton was former dean of Harvard, a very highly respected scholar. His area that he really wanted, he focused his whole life on this, was trying to sort of discern through scholarly investigation, logic, reason, philosophy, theology. And again, they had very few tools to go on. They didn't really have anything in terms of a tradition of historical, textual kinds of things, was to try to find what he believed to be errors in the Old and New Testament and identify those and eliminate those. And he wanted to purify Scripture and all of these kinds of things, really flying without anything other than, the most basic of instruments at all at the time. And Norton put it upon himself to respond to Emerson very publicly. Now, the alumni of the Divinity School met 1 year after Ralph Waldo Emerson's address, and that would be in '39, and asked this. He was nicknamed sort of the Unitarian Pope, to deliver an address. So the next summer, the summer after Emerson had delivered the Divinity School address, some of the bigwigs and alums said, we need to have Andrews Norton come and rebut this. And this discourse on the latest form of infidelity was what he delivered. However, backing up a little bit, Emerson's address originally prompted him, in the summer of '38, to write The New School in Literature and Religion for the Boston Daily Advertiser. So here's the situation. '38, Emerson delivers the Divinity School address. The knee-jerk reaction of Andrews Norton is, I am not going to wait to publish what I have to say in one of the Unitarian journals. Takes too long. I am not going to wait until next year to deliver some sort of response to this outrageous address that Emerson has given at our Divinity School. I'm going to publish something right away, and I'm going to publish it in a newspaper. That was unheard of for the era. To take this private, academic, philosophical, religious dispute and put it in the Boston Daily Advertiser. That would be as if you had gone to TW or UT Arlington or UNT and you'd heard a lecture from a professor at some sort of commencement address and then decided to write a half-page article in the Dallas Morning News about it. Particularly if it had something very controversial. I mean, it really would be taking something outside the academic arena, or writing an article on something you heard at MLA and doing it in the Dallas Morning News and writing about them communist leftist professors at the MLA. Andrews Norton, you just didn't do that at the time. There were publications for Unitarians to utilize to discuss Unitarian issues in, and then there was the Deadgum newspaper. You didn't take this to the newspaper. So he was so upset that he brought it originally to the newspaper. And in that early article, right after the Divinity School address, he claims that transcendentalism is a very dangerous movement. It's an evil, seductive philosophy. It leads young people to atheism. Emerson, he claims, is irrelevant. The question isn't about Emerson. It's how did this guy get invited to deliver this address? Something is broken. We got to fix it, right? There's something wrong in Mudville, and we better check this out and check it fast. But now, once he sort of vented himself in that Boston Daily Advertiser article right after Emerson's address, he had a few months to prepare his more full, complete statement, and here you have it. It's probably not worth looking at line by line, but there are some basic elements that kind of tell you what the Unitarian establishment, well, at least its most conservative elements, like Norton, had to say about the Transcendentalists. Some people, by the way, were quite uncomfortable with Norton's reaction to it. Unitarianism as itself is a very, very liberal religion/philosophy. They have a long tradition of saying, let people say what they want to say. If Emerson wants to say that, let him say it. Norton was a crusader and really felt like Unitarianism was in its early years of establishing itself as a brand new denomination, and they needed to basically distance themselves from people who were giving them a bad reputation, and he certainly thought the Transcendentalists and Emerson were doing that. He didn't like the taunting he was receiving from Congregationalists about your kids are all becoming atheists. By 1839, Transcendentalism also had gained enough adherents and popularity that a newspaper article just isn't going to do it. He's got to come out with something much more formal and much more elaborate as a rejection of this. So guys like Norton really felt a need to offer a full-scale refutation of it, and he does it in here. Now, some of the main points that he pulls out of here is that many Transcendentalists are denying the miracles in the Bible. Unitarians, including Norton, maintained all the way down the line that the miracles described in the Bible were authentic, and that people who did not believe in the miracles could not call themselves Christians. Now remember, Congregationalist says, oh, you Unitarians can't call yourself Christians anyway. I don't know what you're arguing about. But the Unitarians said, no, we are Christians in the sense that we are followers of Christ. He is different. He is special. He's not the Son of God, but he's one and only. He's unique in all of human history, and it was God's plan to send him to earth. And they did believe in the resurrection of Christ. And they also believed in the other miracles that Christ did. Andrews Norton's trying to root out some things that were, he thought, added later to Scripture. Come to find out they largely weren't, but or at least there's no evidence of that. But they were very critical of the Transcendentalists who said, nature itself is a miracle. There isn't a need for God to produce miracles. Everything's a miracle. Emerson even says about the stars, you may recall, that if the stars were to come out once every 1,000 years in the sky, people would walk out of their houses and they would remember it and they'd write about it and they'd ooh and ah for hours. But because they come out every night, we don't think it's that big of a deal. We just say, that's the stars. And so the Transcendentalist perspective is that, the very idea of miracles is repugnant. The whole creation is a miracle. Nothing would happen outside of that. And so Norton is criticizing the Transcendentalists because they deny the miracles. The second thing that he brings up here is that he believes that religion, no surprise here, has to be founded on fact and fortified by study. And, Bowen is critical of that, so he's kind of echoing Bowen. But he's going one step further and saying, these aren't just kooky loonies. These are dangerous people. These people are anti-intellectual. They're a bunch of bubbleheads walking around thinking that they're very well educated, and they're not. And how dare they? And he also echoes Bowen's point about German being largely Transcendentalism being largely a German foreign imported philosophy. But he also kind of adds to it and says it's a kind of pantheism. Now, George Ripley and some other Transcendentalists would come back and say, you have no idea what you're talking about, Andrews Norton. You've never read our stuff. Clearly, you're too dense to understand what it is we're saying. No, we're not going to go to your philosophy classes and take notes and pass the final exam and then be entitled to think what we want to think about life and our purpose in it. But you're also rather stupid if you think we're pantheists, because we aren't pantheists. Pantheism is the notion that all material things are part and particle of God. And Emerson never said that. He said that the me within his body is part and parcel of God. He didn't say his body was. In fact, he went out of his way to say something else other than that. He believes in a strict dualism out there. So one of the things that Norton's essay does is it really largely plays into the hands of the Transcendentalists. There's a whole slew of articles we don't have time to read, and you probably aren't that interested in, that come back and say, this is exactly what we were talking about, that the Unitarian establishment is really narrow-minded, it's dogmatic. They love to think of themselves as being this open-minded, tolerant, liberal, progressive denomination, free inquiry. We're trying to liberate humanity from the constraints of denominationalism. But look at them; they've just become their own enemy. They've just become what they've spent one generation criticizing. In half a generation, they've turned into the same darn thing that they've been throwing stones at. We told you that they were like this, and sure enough, when you read Andrews Norton or Francis Bowen, that's exactly what you get. Now, in our next lecture, we're going to get into not Emerson and not the controversy, but we're going to get into Henry David Thoreau, Walden, and civil disobedience, and we're going to look at that generation a little bit younger than Emerson, who was influenced by those first Transcendentalist writings, but who want not to engage in some sort of philosophical statement or argument or discourse about what is or isn't, but instead want to ask, given these truths, how do I apply them to my life? What do I do with my life? Walden, an experiment in living, is what we're going to be looking at next.